Scales and Pages. Written by Nikolai Weiskopf. Read for you by Adam R. Watson. Story 4. The Unlikely Assistants. Valstus finished her story with Archaeus' theft. Silence stretched and filled the room until Agathis raised and slammed the point of her cane into the flesh of the tree. Lightning spread from the tip. Its white heat scarred the wood floor and burned the air. Wood smoke and storm stench mixed. Both scents stoked Valstus's hunter instincts.
That colony-collapsing mite turd is running around with a magical nightmare armory, and I can't help you because of one stupid contract,
Agathis shouted, and started to cough. Deep body-shaking hacks that forced her wings to spasm uncontrollably. "Can I?" Valstus asked, fighting the urge to rise and hold her friend. Agathis waved her off, then hacked and spat some honey-colored phlegm out the window.
"Just a bit of nectar lung. Nothing you can do,"
she explained, and sucked in multiple breaths. Valstus ignored her friend and placed a hand on her gemstone library. Instantly, she was in the healing facet. What awaited her was absolute anarchy. Every shelf was empty. The floors were rivers of crushed spines, torn pages, and countless books that had nothing to do with healing. She pulled away from the library, silently cursing herself for the mess she'd made. Agathis's cough refocused her, and she switched to searching her memories. When she opened her mouth to suggest a spell, a grating, demanding voice scraped through the concealing buzzing and into her ears.
"Thief! Tree thief!"
it shouted. Instead of words, Valstus rumbled out a growl. "Who is that?" she demanded.
"That would be Gruffbark,"
Agathis answered with a stuttering sigh. Valstus walked past the edges of her spell onto the balcony and looked down at the growing ruckus.
"We sent so many messages. You had months to prepare for this,"
a young apifor buzzed, 4 out of 6 limbs laden with scrolls.
3 hours! We grow, we live, not yours!
Gruffbark proclaimed, his tribe shouting in support. Valstus narrowed her eyes to see the tree folk in greater detail. Each showed different aspects of a tree. Some were twiggish, others mossy, and more than a few were leafy. Gruffbark embodied his name, a thorny beard with dark bark skin and thick, gnarled roots for legs.
"You signed a contract. We protected your tribe and tree, let it grow. Now it's ours. We already have a new tree for you and your tribe,"
the young apifor said, holding out a scroll to Gruffbark. The tree folk leader spat a wad of sap at the scroll.
No, why? That was...
The young apifor fussed, but was quickly cut off.
"Sapling not tree, winter come. Some in tree, others not. Contract kill, not protect."
He crossed his arms and allowed the mob behind him to shout their protests. "Not going to help?" Valstus asked, and blinked her vision back to normal to look at Agathis.
"Eventually. They wrote that contract. This is a mess they made. They can clean it up,"
she answered, and sipped her honeysuckle tea. Valstus looked back. A cup was waiting for her by a gently steaming teapot. She managed one step towards it before the tree folk mob started chanting.
"Thief! Tribe killer! Liar!"
The apifor buzzed and spun in place, trying to address the tribe's accusations. No, I promise it... They didn't get to finish as they spun again and dropped the scrolls they held. Instead of words, they hummed out nonsense, floated antenna first into the tree, and collapsed to the ground.
"The young always forget how easily we get dizzy,"
Agatrice said, chuckling and shaking her head. A few tree folk tried to raise a battle cry. Gruffbach stepped up till he stood over them, and they quieted.
We plant, we grow, we defend. No blood for joy,
He shouted at them.
I talk with Big B. We keep tree,
He declared, and looked up. His cool emerald eyes flashed at each of them. Agatrice nodded. Gruffbach laid a hand on the ancient tree's root. Green light flashed and started racing up the veins of the tree. Should I leave? Valstus asked.
Doesn't matter to me.
Agatrice answered. Both took their seats at the table. Another green flash, and Gruffbach took shape in the middle of the table. He looked at each of them, stood as tall as he could, and crossed his arms.
Dragon yours?
He asked. Dragon is her own, and can leave if you want privacy, Valstus answered, not bothering to hide her annoyance.
Not matter,
Gruffbach said before turning his full attention to Agatrice.
Tree matter. Bad contract. Want change,
He demanded, while the thorny vines of his mustache and beard bristled.
Does matter. We are in the middle of fall,
Agatrice corrected, and sipped her tea.
Find green mage fast. Higher. Fix.
Gruffbach shot back, scratching at his red, mossy hair.
They left last month, which you would have known if you'd read any of the dozens of messages we left at your tree.
Agatrice shot back louder.
Wind. Seedlings. Birds. Take all messages.
Gruffbach stepped up to the table's edge, his full 1¼ foot glaring daggers at Agatrice.
Tribe innocent. Big B guilty. Fix!
He poked one twiggy finger into Agatrice's thorax. To her credit, she didn't splat him into the table. Instead, she set her teacup down and bent till she was eye level with Gruffbach. Are you first root or seedling? She demanded. Valstus sat back in her chair, sipped her tea, enjoying its floral sweetness. The clash of stubbornness between her friend and the treefolk tenant was a welcome distraction from her endless list of problems.
Big B lost memory and sight?
Gruffbach asked, uncertain tones mixing with his outrage. He hid his mouth behind his hand and turned to Valstus to mouth.
You boss now?
She smiled and shook her head.
Time to teach the hard way, then,
Agatrice declared, sitting up.
First root leads. You failed to lead when you didn't tell anyone how many seedlings sprouted this year. How could I or anyone else have known? She asked, picked up her tea, and slurped loudly.
Valstus hid her wince in her teacup. The prior tension she could practically taste vanished. Only the low buzzing of her spell remained.
Gruffbach not.
He started and stopped. His rigid shoulders drooped.
No folk have time. So many mouths. So much time feeding. First, second, third roots all busy. Seedlings only walk now.
He explained, head lowered.
Big B right. Gruffbach fail. Please, help.
He finished and kneeled.
I want to, but no one knows enough green magic to grow your tree in time,
Agatrice answered, and leaned forward, offering a pointed limb tip to Gruffbach.
Please stand. I'm not a queen, and I'm not heartless. I'll see what we can do to make sure you're all safe for winter, she promised.
Gruffbach took her limb and shook it so hard it filled the room with the sound of scraping bark.
Thank you, Big B. Thank you. Gruffbark, never lose another message, he answered.
Somersaulting once, then the second time, flashed into the table and flowed away as green light into the veins of the tree. Still a pushover, Valstus teased. Agatrice buzzed in annoyance.
Big talk from the scale brain that didn't evict the crow's nest on her back because she didn't want to ruin their nest and eggs, she teased back.
Touché, Valstus answered, and inevitably her thoughts went back to that endless list of problems. She'd focused on one problem for 2 weeks without rest. 14 days of observing and questioning everyone at the mill had Valstus ready to pull out every human hair on her head. The smallest remaining rational part of her realized she needed sleep. But the larger, louder, irrational part of her demanded solutions. She summoned and chugged a brown potion for wakefulness and continued her watch. Heavy wagonfuls of finished paper rolled out at dawn and stopped at sunset. Valstus barely blinked during those sunlit hours, searching for shipments concealed with spells. She scribbled furiously, memorizing every single one. The amount of mana they used, how many layers of magic, if they used enchantments or illusions. Every answer was invaluable to help her decide where she'd fly next. At night, she worked to organize her chaotic mess of a library, hoping she could dig out a grimoire to help her along. After 2 weeks of non-stop effort, she had nothing. Her library was still a disaster. Even worse, each wagon's magics were thorough and fragile. The first prevented her from seeing anything, and the second meant if she tried to alter them, the entire wagon would go up in flames. If she'd studied illusions, enchantments, or anything related, perhaps she could trust herself. But even the runes in her dress were more memory magic than anything else. Lastly, she refused to take action that would force Agatrice to fight her. Her lip curled into a snarl as she gnashed her teeth, letting out sizzles and sparks. Her body responded by stabbing her mind with searing fire. She whimpered as all the aches and pains she'd ignored rushed in behind that sensation. Even reaching for mana to cast a numbing spell caused another wave of exhausted agony. Tears slid out behind her closed eyes, her arms shook, and finally her legs gave out. The darkness of sleep took her there, in a collapsed heap at the base of the tree. Arceus's words echoed in every dream. The sound of pages tearing, book spines creaking until they snapped, the sorry state of her hoard. Memories of the stolen grimoires took shape in vivid, horrifying scenes. Arceus's victims all turning to her, accusing her of her failure. She fought with tooth and claw to escape until a wave of soft warmth wrapped around her. The primal part of her searched for the magic invading her. She found none. Only the weight and warmth against her scales.
No danger. You sleep. We guard,
a gruff voice ordered. While her natural curiosity tried to wake her, the direct words and warmth pulled her down into a dreamless sleep. She woke with fingers of sunlight brushing her face. She opened her eyes to a field of deep green. The soft warmth had been a mossy blanket that shimmered with morning dew. For the first time since seeing Agatrice, she smiled, holding it up to admire the work. Instead of just one piece, someone, more likely many someones, had strung together long strands and woven them in and over each other.
Dragon, sleep good?
A familiar voice asked from above. She looked up and saw it was Gruffbark. Better, after you gave me this, Valstus answered. Gruffbark disappeared in a green flash and reappeared with the same flash a few tree roots over.
Good sleep, good day,
Gruffbark said, and leaned on the tree, arms crossed. One can only hope, Valstus said, folding the moss blanket carefully and stretching away the numbness in her arms and legs.
Why dragon watch rolling trees so much?
Gruffbark asked. Dragon's name is Valstus, and I need to know where they are going, she answered, and looked past him as bits of bright blue sky slipped between the leaves. She'd slept till midday at least.
Valstus,
Gruffbark pronounced slowly, trying out the shape of the name.
Why Valstus not read names?
Gruffbark asked. Several things happened to Valstus. Thoughts, questions, and most of all, hope that her exhaustion was not pointless. She stretched as she turned to the tree folk, all the while her pulse pounded in her ears.
Valstus blind like Big B?
Gruffbark asked, nervous and sad. I can see better than most. But tell me, what do you see? She asked. Gruffbark smiled and toyed with a thorny, viney whisker.
Dragon need Gruffbark. Gruffbark tribe need home. Dragon has many homes.
He pointed at the gemstone library. New thoughts, questions, and annoyances piled up in Valstus's mind. How do you know what this is? How would any of you survive? She asked, crossing her arms, impressed at the cunning, while curious about how well he'd thought this out.
Tree folk touch. Tree folk know. Surviving easy. We give up tree for Big B's sun rocks. We bring seed, water, light, green growths, new tribe home.
Gruffbark answered without breaking eye contact. Valstus had no better ideas, and did not want to waste any more time. We'll see if it works, she said, and offered a single clawed finger.
Will work. Tribe make work,
he said, shaking her claws enthusiastically as he'd shaken Agatriss's limb.
I go tell tribe. You tell Big B,
he offered, dancing from one foot to another. I will, she accepted, and he flashed away, his green light flowing across the forest floor. She shook her head and started back towards Agatriss's tree. At best, they tell her which academies to visit, and at worst, she'd invited an entire tribe's worth of trouble. Valstus suspected it was both.
We thank you for listening to this story. Creating the Dragons, books and magic and shenanigans has been a joy. Find more of Nikolai's stories and Adam's content in the links enclosed. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents either are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form or by an electronic or mechanical means, including information storage and retrieval systems, without permission in writing from the publisher, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review. No generative artificial intelligence, AI, was used in the writing of this work. The author and narrator expressly prohibit any entity from using this publication for purposes of training AI technologies to generate text, audio, video, including without limitation technologies that are capable of generating works in the same style or genre as this publication. The author reserves all rights to license uses of this work for generative AI training and development of machine learning language models.